Good afternoon to all of you. Welcome to BusinessWorks Season 2. I'm Angelo Leeson, your host, as usual. And today, we will be talking about technology, a bit of technology, I guess. As always, we always try to bring in something new. So today, we will be focusing on wearable technology, the past, the present, and the future of wearables. And I'll be getting someone special to join in to talk about this specific topic, who also actually has a special company where he's designing, and his new design will come out soon. That's why we thought of bringing him in to talk about wearables. So when you talk about wearables, it's all about, if you follow the industry a bit, you know there has been a huge change in technology and loads of different technology and different tech has been implemented in this wearable industry, where back in the day it was just wristwatches that you wore, and now you can have a fully digital smartphone in your watch. So the technology has developed into a different level, I would say. So let me get this special person. I'm calling this a special person because he's also one of my mentors. But anyways, we'll talk about that part later on. So, Carl Thomas, let me get him connected. Hello, Carl. How are you doing?
Angelo, hi, I'm good, thank you. Thanks a lot for inviting me onto your great program. I'm obviously a follower and I'm really, really privileged and feel excited to be here to have a chat about our relationship and also as well wearable technology and the future of wearables.
Thank you very much for joining in, Carl. And as I told all my viewers, we have a special relationship because when I started my business, you have been there from the start. So before we start talking about our topic, let's just talk a bit about yourself. Let's start by just mentioning maybe who you are and what you do, and a bit about your company and the product that you're working on.
Cool, absolutely. So, hi, I'm Carl. My background, without going too far back, has really been in telecommunications. So, when I was a teenager, my dad set up an internet service provider. And to give you a bit of context, this was before the dot-com era. So, no one really knew what the internet was or what it would be. But we commandeered my nan's attic and front room and basically put a load of servers, a load of modems, and started providing internet services to people who were living in the farms around Bristol in the southwest of the UK, and providing email services and websites. So as a teenager, as opposed to trying to get drunk and I guess chase girls, I was basically running around farms trying to install internet services, trying to sell websites to people that didn't really know anything about it. That was my grounding in technology. That was my grounding in business. And the business did relatively well. We had some peaks, but a lot more troughs than peaks. And eventually, we got acqui-hired, bought out by another internet service provider, which brought me to London to work with them. And the business did really well. I learned a lot about telecommunications, broadly speaking, and we were really lucky to do a lot of work with O2, which meant that I was seconded to O2 for a couple of years, working on a number of different initiatives, helping businesses and other ISPs, internet service providers, really start to understand the change that was taking place with regards to things such as cloud computing, things such as the Internet of Things, etc. And it was with the latter that I really started to get excited about how the internet was evolving to be less about just machines talking to machines, and also less about just social media, but actually more about inanimate objects that were now starting to come onto the internet. So you mentioned obviously, Angelo, smartwatches, smart glasses. These were devices, these are objects that initially had no ongoing utility, no ongoing service. But now the internet, you can put the internet into a watch, you can put the internet into glasses, and the service that it provides is completely different. And that really enthused me. This is going back to 2010 now. So long story short, left the business. We again sold that business across the sky, and I set up a wearable technology company the goal was really to start to provide an ongoing service to headphones, whereby we would start to provide a range of different audio content which was relevant to someone's physiology, relevant to someone's environment at their given time. And I can tell you the laborious story about how I started the company and why, but I think that will have to wait for another time. But ultimately, yeah, we then did a lot of work in terms of developing the intellectual property, patenting obviously the system, the design, but then also as well through growing that company, I started to get an appreciation for starting businesses and just doing some mentoring with different universities, doing some mentoring with different entities that are really helping founders start businesses, which led me to obviously work with London South Bank University and work with yourself just to be a part of your journey, be a part of people like yours journey, and just really start to provide, the mistakes that I learned from, just to provide you with those lessons so that you wouldn't make those same mistakes, basically. And now here we are today. I'm really privileged to obviously be here, but also as well, really privileged to be able to share the lessons that I've learned from my story, both from a wearable technology perspective, but also just broadly speaking, in terms of helping more people be more entrepreneurial.
And to add into what you just said, I would also like to add that about LSBU enterprise team. So Carl is one of the student mentors and enterprise managers. Is that right, Carl?
Yes, yes.
So he was there to help the students. And I was in the GES program at LSBU Student Enterprise Team, hosted by LSBU's Student Enterprise Team. So because of that, I learned a lot. So Carl was a part of my business journey as well. So would you like to tell a bit about what you guys do at LSBU Student Enterprise and how it works and how can a student contact you and maybe get some help on their business projects?
Yeah, sure. So broadly speaking, we recognize that in this day and age that there are a number of options that people have when graduating from university away from just going into employment. And one of those crucial options is how can they start to create, shall we say, wealth or a venture that gives them that ability to start to create income without having to be employed. And what they need to do that is, a certain set of skills without sounding like Liam Neeson, but those skills enable them to be more entrepreneurial. They enable them to be more enterprising. And what we do as a student enterprise team, we like to help take people who are looking at creating those skills to either be a freelancer, self-employed, or even to be an entrepreneur, and just working with them to help develop those skills, enhance those skills, but then also as well, use those skills to actually create companies, create startups, take an idea and then start to validate it to actually start to get customers and take that idea forward into a fully fledged business. We do that via a number of different programs. We do that via mentoring. We have a whole ecosystem of support here at London South Bank University, which is broadly centered and focused around the Clarence Centre, obviously prior lockdown. But yeah, we really help people who have an idea or who want to enhance their entrepreneurial enterprise skills to do that.
Yeah, and I can vouch for what they do and the help that they provide. Because I would like to also say that I wouldn't be in this position today if it weren't for their help. And throughout my business journey, we had a lot of changes in our business model, I would say. And in that whole journey, Carl was especially a part, and the team, of course. And there were loads and loads of events and workshops to help us. And there were loads of other companies that was with me at the moment. We are trying to get some of those companies in some of our future shows. And now, and also, I'm going to put all the information and the subscription link for their newsletter, for their free events down below after the stream. So make sure you watch our show even after the stream. You can use the same link. And Carl, let's go to our first segment. So the question is, what are wearables? I can think of all these smart watches, these smart glasses and stuff like that. So what are wearables? What's your take in it? Like, what is it?
Yeah, that's a really contentious question, but I think ultimately, if you really just break it down, wearable technology is some form of electronics which are worn on the body, right? People think of it as a body computer, people think about it in a number of different ways, but it's ultimately electronics that are worn on the body. Now, what those electronics are, again, as I said, it could be very contentious, but initially you would tend to have some form of microprocessor. as a key part of that electronic stack, that technology stack. But now, that stack usually includes some form of sensor to understand some form of context, whether that's physiological context, physical context in terms of how we move, or whether that's situational context around our environment. There's something sensing something around us that's in that stack. There's obviously the microprocessor that controls that. And then there's some form of radio, which provides data back to some form of central server. So that tends to be the technology stack that's usually in a wearable. And as you mentioned, that stack can be in a smartwatch, it can be in smart glasses, smart headphones, smart garments, smart shoes. There's so many different applications for wearable technology.
And talking about wearables, there was this. I have a specific question which I'm going to ask later on. A bit scary question for me, actually. So I just wanted to ask you this maybe in a third segment. But when it comes to wearables, how do you know? Like, can you differentiate from different products? Let's say there's a smartwatch and there's a watch that like, let's say a traditional watch. So can you classify those into a traditional watch into a wearable, or is there a
So
yeah?
yeah, this is a really good question because I mean, back in the day when I was a kid, one of my first watches was a Casio watch with a calculator on it, right? And
Right.
fundamentally, that could be construed as a wearable because it's got some form of microprocessor in it, which is processing the calculations of whenever I'm tapping into the watch. So in essence, that could be a wearable. However, where we have moved in terms of defining what a wearable system is, I guess these days a wearable system tends to have a sensor as well as the microprocessor to obviously manage and and process all the compute, but then also as well a radio which enables that microprocessor to then output some of that data, that that kind of compute back to something which then crunches or then provides some form of content. So yeah, I think those are the three compelling areas. And if you look at the different applications now which are prevalent in wearables, most of them, so smart headphones, hearables, smart glasses, smart watches, they tend to have those three core components.
And Carl, when you talk about wearables, so you gave me an explanation as to what wearables are. But when you think about the changing technologies, and is there an industry behind this wearable tech? Because it's changing. Can you, like, let's say, the specific question is, if you buy something right now, because the technology is changing rapidly, is it actually worth it? Is it worth it to, like, buy something right now because it's changing? I mean, next month you'll get something different and an updated version of the same, maybe a
Yeah,
wearable.
and this is a really interesting because it starts you thinking about, well, what's the goal of wearable technology? Why are we doing this? Why are we buying these things? Now, most of the wearable technologies that are out there, their key function is to provide some form of understanding or insight into how the body's performing, and then to send that insight back to somewhere, which is then going to either batch, aggregate, manage, store, and then pass that insight to then give us some form of, I don't know, training or coaching around how we should perform. Wearables have moved a lot now over the last 5 to 10 years from just tracking and counting to actually teaching and coaching. So the main thing that people are now starting to recognize, the main value of wearables is actually the data that they're given off. So if you think about that data, then that data, that ability to capture data, that ability to kind of gain some insight from the data, that's going to be the thing that draws people to purchase these wearable systems. And now what you're having is that there are people who are starting to provide some financial value to the data, irrespective of what that wearable is. So, for example, there's insurance companies who say, okay, look, we're going to, on a monthly basis, provide you with a service whereby whatever wearable you wear, we're going to take the data, we're going to then start to interrogate the data and provide you with some form of insurance service or package based on the data. But what you're getting is that you're almost abstracting the data away from the actual device, because it doesn't matter what device you wear, it doesn't matter what device you purchase, as long as the device can start to gain some insight into kind of key biometrics, that service that you're getting is exactly the same. So yeah, to answer your question, we've moved away from just buying devices, if that makes sense, to actually buying services whereby sometimes it doesn't even matter what device actually gives you the ability to understand what the service should be.
So there are more things around this particular industry than directly buying these products, is it?
Absolutely. I mean, wearables as itself, it's a technology, so it's less of an industry because I mean, ultimately, wearable technology can be applied to a number of different industries. So one of the things I used to do back in 2014, before I started my company, I was thinking a lot about Internet of Things and wearable technology. So I set up an events platform for people who were like me, just enthused about the future of wearables and Internet of Things. And we used to hold an event every single month whereby we would do a deep dive into the application of wearable technology in a specific sector. So whether that was sport, whether that was healthcare, whether that was fitness, whether that was payments, whether that was the aged, et cetera, et cetera. And, you know, the application of wearables can be relevant to so many different industries that ultimately it's less about it being an industry in itself, and it's more about it being a technology that can be compelling in so many different areas.
And then a very specific question. What about the privacy? You know, people are talking about privacy as well. And then
Yes.
when we are talking about wearables and the services that are placed around this wearable technology, is privacy a main concern right now when you talk about wearables?
Massive, yeah. Absolutely. So I think it was Satya Nadella, the CEO of Microsoft, who was at the Davos Summit back in January this year, who talked about data dignity. And what he meant was that obviously now we live in a post-Cambridge Analytica world whereby we realize that if we're not paying for something, we are that product. And I think with regards to wearables, people are now recognizing that the data that is given off is actually really intimate to us. It's really, you know, it's very intimate. So there's a lot more focus around what that data is, and then also as well how that data is used. So quick story, in fact, one of my first events that I ran focused on wearable technology. It was I had as a host one of the first chief scientists for Jawbone. And to give you a bit of context, Jawbone were one of the main competitors for Fitbit. So they made at the time smart bands. And he was talking about the fact that they had shipped around, you know, 30 to 40 million devices. They were providing a lot of value to their consumers based on the insight that they were getting from the data. But the unintended consequence that they had was that people were wearing these smart bands for so much more than they ever imagined. Because ultimately, not only did they want to have their 10,000 steps, they also wanted to showcase to their friends that they were really fit and really healthy and doing as much as they can to kind of do that. So they're wearing these bands, you know, throughout the day, when they're eating, when they're sleeping. They weren't taking these bands off, which meant that Jawbone, as just a typical consumer electronics goods provider, were getting so much more data than they ever gleaned on someone's daily life, their behaviors throughout the day. And one of the things that this guy was talking about was literally based on this data. Obviously, it's anonymized and aggregated, but based on this data, he could get trendal data, so patterns based on things such as how often people would go into the toilet. Now,
Right,
that may sound intrusive, but ultimately, if he recognizes that there was a spike with one individual who was, say, going to the toilet 21 times in a day, then
right,
that presents a real ethical challenge. And the challenge that he stated was like, well, hold on a minute. We are a consumer electronics company. We have no real relationship with this end user. The end user has gone to a store like Argos to buy this smart band, to basically wear it, to then gain some insight. But at Jawbone, they don't really have a direct interface with that end user. So how should they then start to tell that end user that, you know what, you should probably go and see a GP about your problem there? They have no relationship. And this is the thing.
right.
Back when wearables came around, it was all about tracking and counting. The wearables that are coming to market now, it's about taking that insight. It's about having this engaged relationship with an end user whereby you can start to coach and counsel and teach and train so that if you do see an anomaly, you can then start to actually help them in some viable, tangible way.
Right. So it's more personal when we're talking about
Absolutely.
right. Okay.
People call it
So
the true personal computer.
so yeah, like even though it's a computer, it's actually communicating with us, and then it has a special relationship with us. That's what you're saying, isn't it?
Absolutely.
So we are talking about wearables, the past, present, and the future. And Carl is on the show uh, talking about wearables. So now it's time for a quick break, and we will be back after this short break, and we will be talking about the future of wearables with Carl. We'll be back after this break.
This is my dad. He was once a bubbly, happy, and positive person. He had been a cancer patient for many years. When I was younger, I remember our long winter walks, the fun times in the park, and all those hilarious jokes. After recovery, he was constantly tired, demotivated, and closed off. I didn't see the amazing smile anymore. That's when I developed my first well-being range using what my mom used on me as a kid, coconut oil. I incorporated coconut oil with my extensive research in aromatherapy oils to help improve his mood. So I gave him a moisturizer, diffuser, and candle, which we named Caribbean Mood. I saw a difference in him, and I saw the amazing smile he used to have. I knew I had to share this with the world. Okay, giving the organic lifestyle you deserve.
Welcome back. Welcome back to BusinessWorks. Okay, and we are back with our season episode 4, and we are talking about wearables today. And we have Carl Thomas, talking about wearables. He also runs a business. He also is a mentor and enterprise manager at LSBU. So we were talking about wearables and what wearables are, and the technology and the services behind it. So it's in segment 2, we will be talking about the future of wearables, potential future influence of wearables. So we can just get an idea about what the future might look like. And let's get Carl back connected to our show. Carl, so what about the future? What can you tell about the future of wearables? Maybe the future influence, will it influence our behavior? Will it influence what we wear, where we go, and what we do? What do you think?
Yeah, so there's a lot of talk, a lot of people who are a lot cleverer than I am thinking about what the future of wearables really entails. Because ultimately, as I said, we are moving from this era whereby wearables have just, in essence, tracked and counted, more into an era whereby they're starting to provide an ongoing utility, they're starting to teach and coach us. And when we think about the different types of senses that we have and the different wearables that are now starting to encroach upon our senses, it makes sense that there's going to be some fusion between that data which they give off and also as well the content that they can provide. So specifically, we're focused on our ears, focusing on headphones and the utility so they can provide to our ears. And this is a future whereby what we are feeling and our environment will then start to inform what kinds of content, audio content specifically, we'll want to hear and we'll want to start to understand and consume. And that will then start to enhance specific activities that we're doing. So, with regards to my company, we're very much focused in the gym environment or the kind of outdoor cardio environment, whereby people are looking at how they can optimize their performance, how they can start to increase their pace when they're running, or start to get quicker when they're running, have better times in the running. So we've noticed that audio really does that, whether it's music, whether it's actually audio instruction, and the ability for some form of sensing device to understand our body and give us cues, we can then start to use that to start to provide really relevant content to then help them in that specific context. And I think, broadly speaking, there are so many different wearable systems now that are looking at how they can understand something about the body and then start to influence the body to act in a certain way, in a way which is obviously beneficial for us, that kind of informs where wearables are going.
So when you talk about, the future, the
Yeah.
point that you made, will it restrict some of the things that we do right now? So what I mean by it is, will it change our behavior to the point that we won't be able to do certain things because there's this wearable technology has evolved so much, and like let's say going outside to play with your friends, will these restrict? Now people were talking about phones, and these new tablets, and children, they don't go out to play anymore, they just play games using their tablets. So some parents complain and some parents love it, but the thing is, like, that's a change in behavior. So I know that, like, depending on the technology, people's behavior has been changing. Like, let's talk about television, and let's talk about computers, and everything just changed the whole world. But will this new technology change the world to a point that it will be completely different? Is there something that you think that will happen with this wearable technology and developing these technologies?
I think when you're starting to hypothesize around the future of technology, there's always going to be that caveat, right? Whereby there's going to be some incredible benefits in the utopia, but in the dystopia, there are obviously going to be some, real massive drawbacks. And I think with wearables, to give you a bit of a disclaimer, I am a natural optimist and a natural enthusiastic optimist. So I think from my perspective that there's much more it's a lot more likely that wearables will actually enhance our ability to be naturally more social and naturally more collaborative, as opposed to take that away. If you think about what they are, I mean, they are a natural, discrete interface to our digital selves. So if I'm wearing smart headphones, I'm naturally and almost frictionlessly getting access to audio content which could be beneficial for me in my real world here. If I'm wearing smart glasses, again, there could be an argument to be said that I'm accessing things that are relevant again to me in my real world. Obviously, there's a number of previous concerns with both, but I think conceptually, there's probably more benefits to almost getting rid of the interface being the screen to our phone, giving us a real frictionless ability to access content which is relevant to us in a given time, therefore making it a lot more easier for us to be a lot more social, a lot more collaborative, and also, more importantly, just more human.
And so when you talk about, it's going to be, I mean, we also have to think positively about tech as always, because the changes are coming no matter what.
Yeah.
But so let's because people are generally they don't like changes or to change. So if someone's a bit worried about this, what do you have to tell them, Carl? Like, if someone's worried about the future, so should we? What do you say to them as a person who's working closely with the wearable technology industry? I would say.
I think it's okay to be naturally skeptical and naturally cautious about the future and what it holds. I think one needs to do their own due diligence in terms of what they're comfortable buying into, what they're comfortable investing their time and their resources into. There are a number of systems that are around us now that are starting to encroach upon our own sense of privacy, our own sense of space, whereby it means that there's more of a trade-off that we need to start to understand before we buy, before we start to use these systems. And I think it's natural that people are going to be cautious. As I said, when you look at what happened with the Cambridge Analytica scandal, you look at how the natural uproar was compared to, you look at the kind of response to that, and there it's absolutely natural that people are going to be very concerned about technology. I mean, the word Luddite literally came from people smashing machines that were created by a guy called Ned Ludd, because they envisaged that these machines back in the Steam Age, I think it was, they envisaged that these machines could literally take them out of a job. So there's always been this natural disconnect between people who are very conscious about the negative challenges that technology may have for them and what that technology is. And I think that's absolutely fine. And it's just about being conscious and cautious as to what you're buying into.
And if you talk about negatives now, since we are talking a bit about negative side of these wearables, what do you think are the negatives, Carl? Like, there are always negatives and positives in a technology, in new technology. What do you think are the negatives, Carl? So what should people be worried about? Is there a, let's say, are there something to be worried about? Or what are the negatives? It can be something really simple, something really minor, or let's say in computer technology, when they started, they were saying that looking at a screen for a long period of time is not a healthy option. So, but it's when you
Absolutely.
have a healthy lifestyle, you can get over it, right? Like you can think of ways to maybe have a rest every 4 hours or 2 hours, or like even in game consoles back in the day, they used to give some guidelines where if you play two
Yeah.
3 hours of gameplay, take a 20-minute break, something like that. But are there any negatives when you think about the future of wearables? Any negative points that you can come up with?
Well, this is the thing. I mean, I think because wearable technology in itself is quite, in the mainstream anyway, it's quite a new form of technology paradigm. I think there's going to be a number of things that we've not thought about. There's going to be a number of challenges that we haven't even encountered, or we can't even envisage right now. But I think fundamentally right now, the biggest challenge is going to be this concept of data exhaust, in the sense that we're wearing all these technologies that are understanding our body, understanding our environment, and they're transmitting data somewhere. Now, we, by buying this device, by buying into this service, we trust that the way in which it's transmitting that data is done in a very secure way, and it's done in an encrypted way. And in essence, that data won't be, it won't be vulnerable to kind of attacks, and it won't be sold or leached. But that's a lot of trust to place in something that we've just paid a couple £100 for, even less. So there's that ongoing challenge that, because these things are going to be in our body 24/7, they're going to be getting so much more insight into us than we even know about ourselves. So if that's the case, then who's going to have that insight? And if they're going to be nefarious, what could they do to damage me with that insight?
And then we also are going to talk about the positives of wearables, and we will be talking about the convergence of wearable technology. And is it influential for the future? And we will be talking about that element after this short break.
AI Infinity really is about helping companies to enable them to use AI at the optimum level and to be more AI-driven companies to solve complicated use cases about the fraud, an example, or maybe customer engagement, facial recognition, and we just wanted to help them to be that. We would see ourselves as a visionaries in detecting some edge computing on a very real-time basis of applications what we have here to enable companies to apply in different verticals.
Welcome back to BusinessWorks. We are talking about wearables, the past, the present, and the future. We have an amazing guest, Carl Thomas, who's actually speaking about these elements. And he was talking about the future of wearables and how it would influence us. But the convergence of the technology and how it will influence the future. To start off this section, I have a very specific question. Is it from Mike L, where you can see it down at our ticker. So, will wearables take over the world along with AI? Just in like sci-fi movies. So, I'm going to put that question to Carl and just to start off this segment. So, the future, convergence of the tech, will it influence the future? Carl, so I'll start off with a question. Will it take over the world?
Well, I'm keen to understand what sci-fi movies Mike has been watching, but I think there's an element of wearables influencing us to either positively benefit whatever we do or negatively benefit whatever we do. There's a really interesting thinker, speaker, technologist, futurist called Ray Kurzweil, and one of his thoughts, one of his kind of seminal thoughts is this notion that there's going to be this fusion between man and machine, creating some form of technological singularity, which at that time, technology will also start to increase at a rate whereby it will become almost uncontrollable and irreversible. And there's a number of benefits of that in terms of aid in healthcare, aging, or how we start to interact together as a community, as societies. But at the same time, one can start to think about so many different negative challenges to that in terms of, machines ruling the world and enslaving humans and, all these detrimental things. But I think as long as we can start to understand how we are developing artificial intelligence specifically, but also more broadly, the advance of technology, we can start to really understand how we can control it and also envision the different applications in which is going to be really compelling in. And we can start to use it to our benefit. And I think as long as we can kind of hold that utopia dear in terms of looking at the benefits that technology and wearable technology really have to ourselves, our communities, and obviously humanity, then as I said, I'm an enthusiastic optimist. I really do believe that there's going to be so many more benefits to be had around how we implement it than kind of detrimental or negative kind of consequences to that.
So yeah, and I have to add something to the question that I have. This is a personal question that I wanted to ask Carl. But before that, I would like to just make a quick point to all our viewers that we are getting some questions. already, but if you do have any comments or questions, you can type down below. And I'll be adding all the information and contact details of Carl and his company down in the description after the stream. And we are always having BusinessWorks shows every Thursday. Every Thursday at 5. We are thinking of shifting it to 6. So to start the show at 6 till 7. So what you can do is you can write to us, place a comment below if that's easier for you. And when you watch our show online, you can always ask questions, and we'll try our best to get our guests to answer your questions. So Carl, I would also like to ask that in terms of when we talk about wearables and the future and the convergence of the technology, will it come to a point that we'll be wearing technology inside our body? And how, I mean, I'm a bit scared about, about this happening. So will it enhance our, some people were talking about enhancing our brain capacity or the brain functionality with chips inside our brains or chips inside our arms or bodies, maybe to enhance our strength. Maybe will that happen? And how, I mean, this is a bit scary. And how scary is it? Will it happen though?
So it's already happened, to be quite blunt about that. I think the first examples that came to my mind about the convergence of the body and technology was with an example with a guy called, I think his name was Mark Warwick, but he was a professor at Reading University. And he was the first person to implant an RFID chip into his hand. And this was like mid to late 90s. And the benefit for him was that he could start to access his office in a much more frictionless way without having to kind of rummage in his pockets for his keys. So that was late 90s. Obviously, we have pacemakers, which are there to start to regulate our heart rhythm. So from that perspective, we already have technology which is in our body, which is there for the benefit of our body. At this moment in time, there's a massive trend, I call it, for people that are looking at biotechnology. So looking at how we can start to do gene editing or start to, look at things such as CRISPR, which is all about how we can start to identify different types of anomalies within our genomic history and start to, change them, amend them to the benefit of us. But then at the same time, there's also this trend whereby people are looking at, they call it ingestibles, pills which have some form of technology which are designed to give us some form of insight into, different bodily functions that we have that we probably wouldn't get insight to without some form of intrusive kind of a procedure. So I think, there's a number of benefits to technology in our bodies that we probably can't even envision right now. But to answer your question, I mean, that's already been taking place over the last 20 odd years.
And quickly, I just, since we are, people are talking about, when we are talking about new technology, we hear these new terms, blockchain, we hear AI, MR, and all these new terms that are coming in, and people get to hear all these terms. So are these all interlinked, Carl? Will this, when you talk about wearables, will it like even blockchain? And when we talk about blockchain, will it? I mean, that's all interlinked with each other. That's the concept. And will blockchain be a main part of wearables, or what are the different technologies? Even AI. And we will be talking about your product in a while. But before that, I just wanted to see how these new terms link up with wearable technology.
So I think when you think about technology, it's very easy to get caught away with in a silo. So wearables is this, and blockchain is that, and AI is this, and they don't really actually intersect. But in practice, they all intersect. They all have commonalities in terms of either the end user application that they're trying to serve, or in terms of how we start to bring technologies to market. They all play a part in a number of different systems. I mean, wearables right now, there's a number of wearables, if not the vast majority of wearables, which are using some form of machine learning, which is obviously a segment of artificial intelligence, to gain some form of insight into what our body's doing. So there's already a crossover there. With regards to blockchain, if you consider blockchain as just being a distributed ledger, a database which is held on a number of computer systems, then in essence, there's a number of different systems which already are using some form of distributed computing. And I think when it comes to how we can start to provide some form of responsibility to end users around how they're starting to control the data, which is then started to, be taken from wearables. Blockchain could be a really compelling part of that, giving people the ability to, as I said, be responsible for their data, gain visibility for their data, but then if they want to, also rent or sell their data in a frictionless way, whereby all of that is recorded on some form of distributed ledger like a blockchain. So yeah, all of these things can intersect. It's just making sure that they intersect in a way whereby it's still compelling to the end user without detracting in a way which is obviously going to be negative.
Right, I think when we speak about blockchain, it will answer our question about privacy as well, isn't it? Because it will help you understand where the data flows, and you can see where the data
Yeah,
goes, and
absolutely. I
more
mean, one of the
transparency.
key USPs, absolutely. So one of the key USPs of a blockchain is the fact that it's a trustless system. You do not have to implicitly trust the other person in that system to be able to interact with them. And that means that we can just trust the code. We obviously get visibility to the code, and we can trust the code to act in a way whereby we're completely comfortable with. And if that's kind of applied to data, and the data that's gleaned from us, then as long as it's stipulated in code that this data will be forever belong to us and we ultimately have control over that, then that's given us some confidence that this is going to be a system which is beneficial to my privacy.
Perfect. And now, talking about AI, blockchain, privacy, and let's go to audio wings, Carl. Audio wings. I know a bit about it. So, can you let us know a bit about what audio wings is? Like, I know it's a headset, but now we were talking about AI elements, you were talking about tracking, and you were talking about all these wearable tech. And where does this audio wings and the product that you're trying to bring into the market, what is it? Tell us a bit about it.
Yeah, I'm conscious that I haven't really talked about it, which is probably a good thing actually. But I mean, to tell you about it, I probably got to tell you why it existed first. So going back to 2013, 2014, there was a time when I was going to the gym on a regular basis, and I was using Bluetooth headphones to listen to my favorite Spotify playlist to make sure that I would get into a state of flow when I was in the gym. I was vibing and I was really in that zone. And I remember specifically, I was, looking at myself in the mirror like all bad gym monkeys do, and just focusing on my exercise without really focusing on what was around me. And I had my smartphone underneath my bench behind me, and I was wearing my Bluetooth headphones. And I remember I was looking at myself, as you do, allegedly, and the audio just fade away with regards to my music. And I turn around, and all of a sudden, my smartphone was no longer there. Someone had actually stolen my smartphone. And after that kind of initial annoyance moment, I was thinking, well, hold on a minute. The only reason why I've got my smartphone in the gym is to get access to my favorite music to help enhance my performance in the gym. So having gone through working with different service providers, ISPs, to think about how we could start to provide wearable technologies and how we could start to, make everything connected, I started to think about how headphones would be if they just access Spotify directly. And that was kind of the germ, the seed that started Audio Wings. What if we could have something on our ears which gave us access to all our favorite music anywhere we wanted, straight in our ears with nothing in the way? And to kind of fast forward, what we're doing at Audio Wings, we're really helping people like myself back in the day just get fit. We're really focused on providing a great service to people who are looking to almost, start to run and amp their performance up. And what we do, we're taking headphones and we're almost turning them into connected Fitbits so that they can understand our physiology, understand our situational context, then start to get really great relevant audio, whether that's music or whether that's audio instructions from great personal trainers to really help us optimize how we perform. It's like
Right.
taking the experience outdoors.
Right. So it has an AI element in it as well, is it? Or is it like a machine learning
Absolutely.
system? Right. So how
Yes, we
can
used a lot of machine learning algorithms to almost do some pattern recognition on what kinds of things we're doing and what kinds of content really helped us perform previously to then make smart suggestions as to what kind of content we want to listen to next.
Perfect. And we will be talking a bit about it and how you can get in touch with Audio Wings. right after this break, and also we will be going for our Q&A segment, a quick Q&A segment actually, because we are running out of time already, and we'll be back after this break.
AI Infinity really is about helping companies to enable them to use AI at the optimum level and to be more AI-driven companies to solve complicated use cases about the fraud, an example, or maybe customer engagement, facial recognition, and we just wanted to help them to be that. We would see ourselves as visionaries in detecting some edge computing on a very real-time basis of applications what we have here to enable companies to apply in different verticals.
Welcome back to BusinessWorks. Today we are talking about wearables, the past, present, and the future with Carl Thomas, the founder of AudioWings, and also a student mentor at LSBU, and also a student enterprise manager at LSBU. And we are talking about wearables. We were talking about what wearables are. We were talking about the future of wearables, the negative impact, the positive impacts, and what the future looks like. And now it's the Q&A round. And the first question is from Julieta. Julieta was on our show previously as well. If you haven't watched it, you can subscribe down below and make sure you watch our past shows. That's free knowledge. You'll learn something new. And Carl, what are the next steps for AudioWings?
That's a great question. And Julieta's seen our journey right from the get-go. So hi, Julieta, and thanks for the question. The next steps, it really is about us starting to prove the market for people that actually want this kind of experience, the ability to get access to great relevant audio so that it helps to optimize and enhance how they perform and how they work out. So we're doing that by running a pre-sales campaign. We're looking to launch a Kickstarter campaign on the 1st of October, whereby people can start to understand a lot more about what we're doing, how we're doing it, and then start to think about whether it's actually going to be the right kind of service for them to use to help make sure that they're, helping them to hit their fitness goals.
So, and if you let us know the exact details of it, we are going to put all the information down in our description, Carl. So once you confirm those, yeah, so if you're watching this show after the live stream, you'll get to see all the information down in the description. And we have another question from Mark. Where does the device's data go? I think it's a generic question as to where it will be going.
It's a pertinent question because ultimately we don't really know with any assured confidence where it goes. We assume that dependent on the manufacturer of the device, that data goes back to the manufacturer and it stays there, and that manufacturer then uses it to gain some form of insight around how we operate, how we behave, to then provide that insight back to us. But ultimately, we don't know whether that data then gets passed to someone else, whether it gets sold to someone else, or whether actually it gets deleted. We just don't know. And unless that manufacturer explicitly tells you, or in fact, unless that manufacturer gets you to read their 70 odd million pages of terms and conditions that you probably didn't read, then that's probably going to be an element of there's going to be a lack of trust in that manufacturer potentially. So yeah, it's very important to understand specifically what happens to the data, how that manufacturer, that brand uses that data to then understand whether actually that device is going to be a device which is going to be worthwhile you purchasing.
Perfect. And there's another question from Sam. Is manufacturing future wearables challenging? So I'm guessing what he's asking is like, the manufacturing process maybe for the future technology?
Yeah, that's an interesting question again, because I think what's happened over the last decade is that there's been a number of different technologies which have helped manufacture and become a lot more available to probably the hobbyist, shall we say. So, for example, additive layer manufacturing or 3D printing, shall we say, that's meant that people can start to mock up concepts quite quickly with access to 3D printing labs or even a 3D printer on your desktop, which will give you the ability to obviously print out a concept very quickly. Obviously, there's a lot more people now who have access to things like Raspberry Pis, Arduino boards, which gives you an understanding of how you can almost plug and play electronics to get some form of system to do something which is what you intend it to do. That then gives you the ability to prototype, which then gives you the ability to actually test an idea, validate it, learn from the feedback, and then actually go to a manufacturer and say, look, this is kind of what we want to develop. This is how we validated it. How do we actually make sure that we can now develop something which can scale and we can start to ship it out in quantity? But at that point, manufacturing hasn't changed massively. When you think about how people are starting to batch produce devices, the processes that they use, the tools that they use haven't changed markedly compared to what they were using to maybe develop smartphones or laptops or desktops prior to that. It's just really, we've now got the ability to be a lot more iterative in how we validate with prototypes at that early stage, as opposed to trying to assume that the market for this kind of device is going to be massive. So therefore, let's try and find a manufacturer and just go off without actually doing that validation work previously.
Right, perfect. So I hope you got your answer. So unfortunately, that's...
In fact, hopefully that helped.
Hopefully. But unfortunately, that's the time. Our time is up for the show. But before we leave, Carl, in terms of Audio Wings, where can people, is there a website that you have where people can contact you? Maybe if there are any, are you searching for any partners? Are you searching for anyone maybe for commercial purposes, or if you want to do some test runs on what's like in terms of technical elements? Is it ready? Is the product ready so far? And how just let us know a bit about, when you'll be, like putting this product out.
Sure. So at the moment, we've got a works like prototype and a looks like prototype, which are very different. Basically, we've got something which looks like what we want to actually sell and something which works like what we want to sell. So we're always keen to work with people who are enthused by the vision of what we're doing, whether that be from a commercial perspective, people that are great marketeers, great designers, etc., or whether that's from a technical perspective, people who are great software engineers or great hardware, electronic engineers, etc. We're always keen to work with people that have some form of enthusiasm and passion for kind of what we're doing. So the best way to reach us, to have a look at the website, it's www.audiowings.co.uk. That's www.audiowings.co.uk. And I'm usually Carlos de Jackal on most social media. And I'm sure that'll be on the show notes underneath.
Yes,
so feel free to reach out.
Indeed.
Audio Wings.
What we'll do is, after the show, we'll put all the information below in the video intro section, and make sure to subscribe so you get all the like new information about the shows. And if you watch our past shows, if you want additional information about the guest, all the information will be in the intro page. But unfortunately, that's our time for today. So thank you very much, Carl. Thank you for joining, and totally enjoyed our conversation. I hope you guys learned something new as well from Carl. So all the information, as I told, all his information will be down below after the show. Make sure you share and subscribe, and make sure you watch our shows in a regular basis. And it's always live broadcasted on Thursdays. Thursdays usually at 5. According to what you guys say, we might push the show to 6 o'clock every Thursdays, but it depends on you. And this show is all about business and helping business owners, students, and anyone who wants to learn something new. And we will be having someone special next week, which you'll get to know if you subscribe, and make sure you press that bell icon right next to the subscribe button, where you'll get all the notifications of the upcoming shows. And we have an amazing lineup of themes and topics, I would say, and content, free education, free workshops in the upcoming shows. So it will be continuing throughout the lockdown period, and even our initial plan was to have a live audience, since there are some issues around social distancing, and there are some, not issues actually, some guidelines around social distancing. We won't be able to do that at least till the end of the year, but we'll keep you updated. So all you have to do is subscribe and press the bell icon. So next week's show will be announced by Monday. So make sure you tune in and keep an eye out on all the updates. And I'm Angelo Leeson. This is BusinessWorks, and I hope you have an amazing evening. See you next week. Thank you very much.